Hello, this is Todd Pressley. This is another episode of Getting More Out of Your Tabletop Simulator. This episode is about building 3D models. We'll be downloading some models from our Tabletop Simulator modules that we've downloaded from the workshop. We'll be taking those models and recoloring them, looking at them in a 3D rendering. We'll be modifying the images that render those 3D objects, and we'll be taking them back into Tabletop Simulator and making them render onto the desktop, and hopefully you'll stick out with this whole episode, and let's get started. For this episode, we're going to start out in a slightly different place. We're going to show first off where information is located, and try to tie that back to all of the information we collected from our backup. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at this Russian Hussar. We're going to change his uniform. That's the goal anyway. And we're going to start out with this model. And if I click on the custom icon, we can start looking at some of the information here that's loaded as for the part of the model. So we're going to look for a file name that ends in NTW unit French Hussar high, and that's the object file. So we'll make sure we keep track of that. And so what I'm going to do for my own notes is I like to use a snipping tool just so I can grab some of these. I'll save this as a quick note. Just grab an image, and then I'll use this as note 1, just save it to my desktop. And the second one is the image. Once again, has a kind of a cryptic name to it. So what I'll do is I'll grab that one as well. Now that I've got those two files captured, so I now know what I'm looking for. Then I can get out of Tabletop Simulator. I don't need this information anymore. And we'll go start concentrating on some of the other applications. So next thing to do is to go back to my mods. And first thing we're going to look for is in the models. We're going to look for French. Alright, there's quite a few of them in here, but I was looking for the French Hussar. And that looks like that model right there. So I'm going to keep track of that one. And I'm going to bring up another Windows Explorer. Go back to my Documents directory and My Games. And under My Games, Tabletop Simulator. I've got my backups, my mods. I'm going to go look for images. We're going to go look for that other name. This is the one that we saw for Note 2, this JPEG. Has a name, DNQ5. That should be sufficient. DNQ5. There it is. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to keep a copy of both of those, and I'm going to put those under my... I have a folder called Classes for where I'm building up all of the information for these classes for CYBÖR. And I'll go ahead and so modifying objects. I'll grab a hold of, make a copy of this. You can kind of see in that picture right now, that certainly looks like that Hussar. And here's that French Hussar that was used for the Russian army, which is kind of interesting here. Alright, and I'm just going to rename this one to Hussar. I'll rename this one just for the class, so we're clear on what's what, and be able to recall that. So I can close that, and I don't need these notes anymore. So that's where I'll store stuff. So then let's bring up Blender, and we don't need our default cube anymore. And we'll go ahead and see if we can't open that object file. And we're going to import that object file. There's Wavefront. Under Documents, this is on my desktop, so it's under the CYBÖR classes. Modifying objects, there's my Hisar. So we'll import him. And lo and behold, there's that 3D model that we were just talking about. And kind of pretty plain right now because he's not wrapped with his information. So the good news is these Wavefront models do provide the UV mapping. Remember the UV mapping from the previous episode. And so when he unwraps, when we tell him what file that he needs to be part of, or what file gives him all of his colors, they'll get mapped to the correct location on the miniature. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up one that I've already done. So we can talk a little bit about the mapping process and making sure that there's not only a color map, but you have to describe what nodes and how do the nodes map onto the figure. So give me a second to bring that up here. So where's my lifeguard? So I'll bring this up. It's under Desktop, Classes, Desktop, TTS, Figures, Lifeguard Hisar. Alright, so this Lifeguard Hisar, we've got these different nodes down here that describe how it should map the information onto the miniature. And so if I go ahead and render this miniature, assuming I didn't just crash Blender, there we go. There he's wrapped. So we're going to basically replicate these nodes so that our miniature will get rendered in the other file. And there he is again. Alright, so now what we have to do is we have to go into shading. And we got to tell it how we would like it to be shaded. And so that means that I've got to go bring all this information into there he is. Got to actually select everything. And so this is what's going to be rendered, and here's the information that we're going to import, but notice, or that's the information that kind of puts it all together. But notice that there were a few other nodes here that we don't have on our default. So I'll zoom in here a little bit so you can see So basically what I have are two textures. Both have the texture map for the lifeguard hussar. Looks like I made some changes here by mistake. Go. Alright, so I have to add these two textures. It's actually the same texture. It's the lifeguard hussar graphic that gives it these colors. We're going to do the same thing, only we're going to do it with the hussar graphic. So first things first, add a texture, image texture, there. And I do the same thing again. I'm going to do an image texture. And then I open to my hussar PNG. Guess it couldn't figure out where it was, so we're going to keep at it here until it does what we want it to do. Alright, so the other thing that we have to do is now we have to wire it to the right places. So the first one is going to be the top one is going to be the color. The bottom one goes back down here to emission. So color goes to emission and color goes to base color. Color goes to color and color goes down here to emission. Okay, so immediately, as we already have render selected here, that hussar looks just like it did on Tabletop Simulator. You've got the pants, the pelisse, his jacket, and of course all the colors. That's all there is to it to getting it into Blender. And if you wanted to change the shape of this model and change his sword position, or to give him a banner, or whatever you wanted to do to change this model, you could use the same technique to start with this graphic and then to render whatever else you wanted on top of that. So we need to go start working on him to make him a lifeguard hussar. And that lifeguard hussar has got blue pants and a red jacket, a red pelisse, which obviously is very different than the model is here. If we look at this graphic, so we'll bring it up in GIMP so we can see what this model looks like when we unwrap it. We're not going to do wrapping, unwrapping in this tutorial. There's a lot of really good scenarios, or a lot of really good tutorials online that will give you that experience, and they'll give you instruction on that. And so I'm not going to repeat those instructions here. So we're just going to jump right into GIMP. Open. Gotta get my computer to catch up with me here. I'm going a little too fast for it apparently. So we are on my desktop, classes, modifying objects. There's my hussar. We're going to go ahead and open that. And there he is. Obviously very different look and feel here. This is actually the boot, which is pointing at his head, so you can see how convoluted these graphics can get. And what I'm going to do is start making some modifications, and I'm not going to finish this model really in this scenario. Once again, it's not about learning how to run GIMP, but it's about learning the techniques. So I'm going to do a few changes here to give him kind of a slightly different uniform colors, and then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and render that back into Blender and then upload it back up into Tabletop Simulator. So first things first is we're going to change some of these red colors to blue. And one of the easiest ways I've ever found to get started with is the fuzzy tool, which was great at selecting the same color and kind of getting you started in any of these efforts where you want to change colors. I mean, obviously the best technique is to basically redraw this in an image format, but when you're just trying to get something done, this is a really fast way to get going. And then once I've got the fuzzy mode selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change all these red items into light blue. So this will be my blue color, and what I'll do is I will just fill these in, and then I'm going to do some more filling. You see what I'm doing here is I'm actually choosing kind of the light colors first. And I'll fill those in, and then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come back and I'm going to reselect. I'm going to take a slightly darker blue now. And notice that it does save my last several color notations. And so I'll take these and I'll make it a little bit darker. And I'll go ahead and start grabbing some of these darker areas so I can create the shadow colors. And then you basically would go through and continue to clean this up so that it's nice and well formed, and all this red is gone. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to skip on to the next part here. We're going to go and get this collar fixed up so it would show up well when we move this model over. And notice that only half the collar is done, only half the face is done. That's because the way that they set up the model is that this information is replicated. So the left leg and the right leg, you only have to really do one leg, only half the face. So it's kind of a neat method. And so I'll come back here. I'll go back to my original color. I'm going to go select here and grab that color, and I'm going to select some more. How much I'm going to be able to do here. Okay, and that'll give you an idea of what you need to do. And then you can always come back and do some airbrushing and kind of clean up some lines and things like that. I do that quite a bit. But this will give you kind of at least a starting point of what to do. And then for this, I then save as a new CYBÖR, new file. I'll save a copy for myself so I can start modifying it, and then I have to export. And I'm going to have to export as a JPEG. Or let's say PNG will work. That'll work. So I'll go ahead, CYBÖR 2 PNG, export. There we go. So now I'll take this and I'll go back into my Blender, and I'm going to give him a new file. So instead of this file, he's going to get a new image, it's CYBÖR 2. And this one, same thing, CYBÖR 2. And you can see where his pants have changed and his collar has changed. So kind of a quick way to get to a new set of colors. Obviously quite a bit of cleanup to do, but that actually will get you to that model. And now what I will have to do is I would have to send this out as a wavefront file. So I will now just save a copy. Always a good idea to save in the native format. And so I'll save a copy. I'll save this as my WÅRS 2, and it's under my desktop figures. Not where I want it. This is under the class. Desktop classes. I'll save here under modifying objects. Save as. Then I'm going to go ahead and save and do an export in wavefront format. It's good. WÅRS 2 object. Perfect. Alright, so as soon as that's done, I can now go back to my tabletop simulator, and I can now add an object. Components, custom, model. Keep it away from everything else so it doesn't go bouncing all over the place. It's a model. Desktop, classes, modifying objects. There's my WÅRS 2. Select that. I'll just keep it local for now, but you can upload it to the cloud. And there's my WÅRS 2. I'll keep that local as well. And as soon as I say material, make him as cardboard, and import. And there, he's been upgraded or uploaded. So if you notice that he's probably a lot larger than some of the other WÅRS. If I select another WÅRS, he shows up as 0.65. The scale is 0.65. So if I did 0.65 in here, 0.65, 0.65, 0.65. Now he's scaled correctly. He should fit right on a horse. Grab a horse. all one thing now. And we have finally done it. Often takes a little fiddling to get there, but there you go. Obviously a lot more to work to do on that. Get rid of all the red, but you get the general idea. Thank you for joining another episode of getting more out of your tabletop simulator. This one we talked about 3D models. I hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you next time.